Finally it was over, the fourth bloody shinobi war was finally over. Thousands millions of men and women alike sacrificed their lives to protect everyone they loved and cherished. But at what cost? A young man of 18 years of age whispered, sorrow slipping through his thoughts. This man was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, son of the Yellow Flash Minato Namikaze and the red-hot habanero Kushina Uzumaki, former container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, Kurama. Also the person to stop the war against the madman Madara Uchiha and Kagaya Otsutsuki, who was behind the whole thing for centuries, by utilizing the power granted to him. He gazed at all the dead bodies around him with his purple-ringed eyes, aimlessly seeing some that he knew, and some he would never saw in his life if it weren't for the war. Sasuke, Sakura-chan, Kakashi-sensei, Shikamaru Tenten, Kiba, Lee, I'm sorry I couldn't protect you, all Naruto said with a heavy sigh, thinking of all his precious people who died in this pointless war, but one person stung the most. Kurama, Naruto said with a sad frown plastered on his face, that overgrown fox has been through thick and thin with Naruto since day one, even though they didn't see eye to eye until the war, he considered Kurama his brother, maybe even a father figure. The war brought unexpected results. The primordial god Kyuubi was sealed inside of him after he defeated Madara, who later revealed themselves as Kagaya Otsutsuki moments later. Because of his new power-up it was easier to fight Kagaya on equal grounds, but because of his sudden ascension to godhood, he was inexperienced at using his newfound destructive powers. But Naruto wasn't known as the most unpredictable knucklehead for nothing, as he was easily able to grasp most of the power on the spot, making it easier to battle the rabbit goddess. Unfortunately the rest of Team 7 was killed by Madara before Naruto could deal the finishing blow as he watched helplessly, and to growing horror Black Zetsu betrayed Madara by literally stabbing him in the back and brought out an even more fearsome foe. Kagaya Otsutsuki. Naruto could honestly say that he never fought so hard in his life, but he felt an odd sensation that Kagaya's actions were not her own, almost like she was being controlled. But who could influence a goddess? The only reason he survived this long was because of his sudden rise to godhood. After that he stood a better chance against Kagaya, and he noticed that his power was still rising. When he became one with the Kyuubi he noticed he was as powerful as Kagaya, but as the fight dragged on both newly instated god and goddess saw that his power was soaring, making leaps and bounds in thoughts not imaginable. In no time he was easily able to overpower the beautiful goddess and finally seal her into a smaller-sized moon once more with his powers. Finally, with some clarity and peace, Naruto was able to dwell on his powers, and thankfully there was a puddle from a recent water jutsu to see how the Kyuubi changed his appearance. He grew taller, about 61 if he had to guess, his skin took on a lighter tone, giving off a slight glow, most likely being his new status as being the Kyuubi's container. His hair grew longer, reaching slightly below his shoulder blades, while they took on a distinctive white color, while retaining the shine of his previous hair color, making it look like a full moon. He had two horns jutting out of his head which were longer than Madara's, but shorter than Kagaya's horns. Since his hair was long and spiky towards the front, it made the horns seem to blend with the hairstyle. His face took more of a chiseled look with high defined cheekbones, while losing all remaining baby fat he still had on him, giving him a sharp angular face, which gave way to a more noble look. Rubbing his cheek he noticed that he was missing his whiskers marks, making him frown softly. I remember I used to hate those whisker marks, now that they're gone I miss them. Naruto sighed, sadly reminiscing of his younger, rowdier days. Finally, the last big difference was his eyes. No longer were they the cerulean blue eyes everyone loved, nor the fearsome orange eyes of his sage Kyuubi mode that his enemies feared. No, these were metallic purple with black rings circling them with 3 tomos on each ring, signifying he acquired the Rinnegan in completed form. So that's what they'd look on me. I was always jealous of Sasuke team for getting that cool eye. Naruto chuckled humorlessly, slightly tracing a finger around said eye. Thinking he was done with the inspection, Naruto was about to walk away when he noticed something shocking. He saw a small, almost unnoticeable slit on his forehead, making the young hero gasp. Somehow, already knowing how to open the eye, he willed it open, discovering it was the same eye on Madara and Kagaya, except it had an extra row of tomos and glowed a brighter red that rivaled the blood moon in the earlier fights. Naruto just sighed. Has been doing that a lot this past hour, head dwell on that later. Suddenly Naruto stopped rigid in his spot before energy started radiating out of him at an alarming rate, and he could see that the massive godly energy was starting to take its toll on the planet as it started to shake violently. To his ever-growing horror was he noticed that his godly energy started to take the leftover residue energy from Kagaya, making the shinobi turned god even stronger from Kagaya's equally godly power. Soon the power was growing too much. Naruto felt like an explosive seal waiting to go off at any moment. Naruto had no idea what to do as he was panicking, making the situation worse because the power was reacting to his emotions. He started to notice that the combined power of both godly powers in such short time was starting to take their toll on him. As the power started to turn visible, he could see that any remaining energy left over in the battlefield was being quickly absorbed into his body, making his body more unstable. Naruto felt like a supernova ready to go off. Yeah, not a great feeling. He saw no other choice but to seal himself. Unfortunately, he wasn't a seal master yet, so he couldn't suppress the power. He saw no point in killing himself when Hess came this far, and from the constant rise of power he couldn't simply work it off. Sighing, Naruto just looked back at the war-torn battlefield one last time before coming up with something on the fly by clasping his hands together and calling out the technique that he remembered when fighting against Nagato for the first time that would seal him until he said otherwise. Gabaku Tensei. Naruto said, knowing the move automatically from seeing it many times before. The effects were instantaneous as the ground started to split and break and rise in the air alongside him, while he calmly kept the jutsu in place. After about 5 minutes, the finishing touches of technique was almost complete. Last thing you could see was Naruto's sad smile before it went dark. What Naruto didn't see was the leftover residue of his godly energy left behind started to form to show individuals formed from said power. These individuals would later come to call themselves as titans, giants, and soon gods who would come to be legends. Thousands of years later. Sitting in a lotus-style position, we could see the container of the Juubi calmly meditating in mid-air in the blackness of his seal while thinking. "What are you thinking about, Naruto-kun?" a female voice said within his mindscape. "I'm thinking I'm finally ready to leave the seal. I've mastered my powers to a degree not imaginable, Asako-chan." Naruto replied back to the now named Asako. During his sealing, Naruto was still self-aware of his surroundings, so he had time to learn about his powers more in depth with the help of Juubi, or he affectionately called her later on Ko-chan, since she was the first entity with said powers. Boy, it was a surprise when he found out the great and almighty Shinju Tree was a female. Of course, he had no qualms to her being the opposite gender. In fact, he was grateful for female companionship. The only reason he thought of her as a male was because of the simple fact of her big monstrous form. He fought in the war, believing it to be male or at least genderless. She explained everything since her separation of power and soul from the Sage of Six Paths when battling his mother. Her body took on a hideous form which only possessed the urge to kill and destroy. During his time in his seal, his power and potential have shot through the roof. His power continued to increase for at least another decade or so before it finally came to a slow-moving pace, almost unnoticeable. Thankfully, he was still able to train inside the seal without damaging the moon construct. He was able to fully master his Rinnegan, control his godly power, learn new techniques, and even improve the ones he already has. His strength was great as it was able to make a massive gust of wind with just a normal punch, able to run around the entire construct in less than 10 seconds, learn to control all the elements to his will. Mastering the powers granted to him by the Shinju and some extension Kagaya, learned how to float and even fly, which brought out a chuckle out of the godly shinobi. He always did want to fly once he first saw Inoki doing it. There was many things he learned and did that would make any normal person cower in fear. On the bright side, his relationship with Asako had formed into romantic feelings until they were inseparable, no pun intended. He did this by using a clone and transferring her essence into the clone and reinforcing the clone with his godly power to make it more durable. Once destroyed, she would simply go back to the seal. Naruto's appearance didn't really change much over time. He still retained his pale complexion, but it was darker, giving some of his tanned skin back. His hair grew to the bottom of his back, which he was forced to put into a spiky ponytail. He was planning on cutting it, so it reached below his shoulder blades once more, so the hair wasn't a nuisance once he gets out of his makeshift seal. His horns got slightly wider, but because of his thick spiky hair, most of the protrusions were hidden underneath it. But the biggest difference was his power. When he first got his godly powers, he was slightly below Kagaya's in power, but with some thousands of years under his belt to practice and train, he felt like her power was laughable at best to him. Before, his godly power was wild and untamed, but now it was refined, controlled, balanced even. It was like comparing the ocean to a pond. An unfair comparison, honestly. Sighing, he stood up to his height, working out the kinks in his body. Maybe he should purposefully nerf himself just to make it fair for anyone out there. Nah, where's the fun in that? Picking up his shackage, in which he had both the sun and moon symbols proudly displayed on it, he let out a breath of his somewhat home for the last time before he'd be thrusted back into the world, knowing full well that the world changed and he'd be out of his playing field for the moment. "Ready, Ko-chan?" Naruto said with a small smile on his face. "Always, Naru-kun," the 10-tailed female said with a small grin. With the flick of a hand, Naruto was able to create a human-sized hole in the moon construct before slowly walking out in a sedate pace before flying down. Once he saw he was in the vacuum of space above the earth, lack of oxygen didn't really bother him as he could last days in space before a need for air. When he looked back from his exit of his moon, he saw some banner of sorts with red and white stripes with white stars on a blue square next to some metal contraption. With a confused look he didn't know what it was but shook his head as he made his way towards the planet below. Artemis. Artemis sighed in frustration as she was traversing the forest alone without her hunters, as she wanted to be alone after the latest council meeting. Her father Zeus slapped on a new law onto every single god and goddess that they are not allowed to interact with their child in no way, shape or form until they're claimed. Even then that was limited. This law happened because everyone discovered Poseidon sired a child that just came to light recently. Seriously, it was an utterly stupid law. If she said so herself, that would spell disaster sooner or later. It made Zeus look like a hypocrite because he sired over at least a dozen children of his own, while all but ignoring his wife Hera except for sex. Artemis was a 54 woman with black hair cascading down to her forehead and down to her neck. She had silver eyes that glowed as brightly as the moon. Her lips were a brilliant pink color while maintaining a pouty look to them. She was wearing her usual white tunic with bronze armor covering parts of it. She had a tiara on with her symbol on it with a bow and quiver on her back. This was Artemis, goddess of the hunt, moon, and chastity. Looking up to the moon, she grew a small smile as she gazed at it with a passion hardly seen in her eyes. Since her domain was a connection to the moon, she knew exactly what or exactly who was in there. It was an entity greater than all the gods, titans, monsters combined, and was the origin of the first titans with his unworldly power who then birthed gods who produced even more gods such as herself. This being was the one who was thought to be chaos himself, and the moon was his home for millennia. Whenever she was angry or depressed, she would gaze up at the moon, seeking out this person's warm and calm energy who would calm her down. It gave her comfort in her darkest moments, such as the betrayal of Orion, death of Hippolytos and many more. She never informed the council about this because if she did, her father Zeus would do something utterly stupid that would backfire on all of them. Another benefit with being connected to the moon and this godly being who she later knew as Naruto was that she saw his entire life from birth to his ascension to godhood. When she first saw it, her expressions varied from anger of his mistreatment to sadness at the hardships he had to face, such as his godfather's death, to happiness at the recognition he deserved. She was highly interested and respected this person and would like to know them if that day ever came. Gazing up at the moon, she felt a sudden warm and serene aura wrap around her very being that made her feel truly one with nature. Suddenly that aura suddenly disappeared, making her gasp at the sudden disappearance of power flowing through her. Snapping her neck upwards, she saw with her eyes that a silhouette was moving towards her at a moderately normal pace, making her tense and ready her bronze dagger. A male landed in front of her, that much she knew, but he was dressed in strange worn-out clothing, making her quirk her delicate eyebrow in confusion. Last time she saw clothing like that was Athens yapping her ear off about the forgotten shinobi era and some blonde who apparently saved the world. It certainly fit the description. Normal POV. After setting his feet on the soft grass, Naruto gazed at one of the most beautiful women he's ever seen in his life. A beautiful and delicate face with supple lips, long eyelashes to complement her silver eyes, long black hair cascading over her head. Her body was equally stunning. C-cup breast which looked about the right size for someone of her stature, wide childbirthing hips, a firm butt that fit her perfectly, long legs that seemed to go on for miles. She's gorgeous. Naruto thought he didn't blush because Asako helped him control his sexual urges and hormones, so they didn't affect him, but she was still beautiful nonetheless. She sure is, Naruto-kun, you should mate with her. Asako giggled in his mind, making him facepalm internally at her perverted nature. Hello, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, could you please tell me where I am, miss? Naruto said with a big grin that made her think of a fox's smile. At least he still kept that aspect. Wait, did you just say Naruto Uzumaki? Artemis asked. The cause is that my name, why do you ask? Naruto said with a raised eyebrow. It's just that I've only heard one person with that specific name before and they're supposed to be sealed in a moon. Artemis said with a slight undertone of suspicion while pointing to said moon. Funny story, I did come from that moon, been in there for a couple of thousands of years. Naruto said with a small sheepish chuckle, rubbing the back of his head. It took Artemis a full minute to comprehend what he just said, but once he did, started to bow and apologize to the primordial god. I'm so sorry I've shown disrespect to you. Artemis said, continuing her bow. Naruto frowned as he walked up to her and placed his hand on her shoulder to calm her down before smiling. Please no bowing, Ms. Naruto lingered on. Artemis, the goddess of the moon, said quickly. Yes, please don't bow to me, Artemis, it makes me feel old, and a beautiful flower like yourself shouldn't be doing something such as bowing. Naruto said with a smile, reassuring her, while a light tint of pink appeared on her cheek at his unintentionally compliment. Contrary to popular disbelief, Artemis didn't outright hate the male gender, it's just that 9 out of 10 every male she met always left her a bad impression. She really hated that stereotype that mortals came up with, thinking that Artemis hated every single male in the world with no reason whatsoever. First impressions were always the best and the person in front of her didn't know her label. As you wish, Artemis said with a nod of the head. So Archan, what can you tell me about this day and age? You know, being in a moon for who knows how long can put you out of touch with the modern world. Naruto said, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. Archan? Artemis said curiously, not knowing the affection suffix. Her brother Apollo was the one who dabbled in the Japanese stuff, not her. Makes her somewhat regret not learning more of that area, but whatever. Well, generally it means you're cute. Naruto said with a chuckle, making her awe in realization before realizing what he said, making her sputter slightly and blush that she forcefully stomped down. Getting a grip on herself, she started to take deep breaths. In all of her immortal life, no man has ever made her blush or sputter in such a way in such little time, not even Orion. Shaking out of her stupor, she thought back to his question since she didn't want to ask it from him again. Well, to answer your question, Naruto, it's the 20th century. I don't know for sure what differences there were from this era with your old one, so would like to talk to you on that to possibly clear things up. Replied the moon goddess, getting Naruto to nod on the information. Sure. Naruto smiled before he clapped his hands once as wood sprouted from the ground, forming a table and 2 chairs. He soon pulled out a little scroll from his waist pouch to summon with some warm tea, surprising the moon goddess, but got over it quickly before taking her own seat. Hours later. It was an hour into their conversation, and the two learned so much about each different eras. Naruto learned that the age of shinobi and chakra has all but died out, instead humanity had to practically restart from scratch, and millennia later started to focus on the advancement of technology. He learned that people used guns now to fight their battles instead of kunes, katanas and the like. He learned that the further advancement of technology grew, the more dangerous it got. He learned that the greed and arrogance hadn't changed one bit in humanity, even after things practically restarted after he sealed himself, as he displayed horror when Artemis told him that humans came up with a weapon many years ago, known as the nuclear bomb. The damage one could cause was the equivalent of the 2-tailed Matatabi Bijadama. While Artemis learned that it was an era where fighting was as natural as breathing or walking. When going through her memories, that she compared Naruto's era to roughly that of the feudal era of Japan, with some advancements of technology like with handheld radios for missions, some trains in certain countries, a giant heating generator that turned a tundra climate country into one of permanent spring, and various other examples. Not as high-tech of today, but it still was very impressive. From her memory she knew that shinobi were highly destructive people, compared to the stereotypical one centuries back, seeing as she saw an image of a man known as Madara Uchiha, simply cast a arm down, and meteors would fall out of the sky. Now that slightly terrified her. After the discussions of rough era comparisons and whatnot, Naruto wearily asked on why she had brought up herself being a goddess, and she caught on to his uneasiness, because the last goddess he met tried to enslave the world and its occupants. She soon told him of her titles and what she practically does for each of them, which made him understand before getting into a small summary of her fellow gods and goddesses, making him hum in acceptance, not detecting deception from her. He knew full well about his accidental surge of power, who came as the origin of titans who later birthed gods and giants. In a sense he was the creation of them. Yeah, that was going to give him a headache on that little process, but hey, he is getting a lot of information all in one night. The two didn't realize of how long they were chatting, as they were enjoying their conversations very well after the information exchange. Each of them started talking about their interests and experiences that got the other entertained while they were drinking the rest of Naruto's tea supply. Naruto went from adventures Hess had fighting the one-tailed raccoon all the way to his final encounter with the goddess herself. Artemis soon went into detail on her past hunts, from capturing the golden deer, dealing with the giant war, to facing against the Caledonian boar, each paying rapt attention to each other's tales. The two soon noticed things getting a bit brighter as they gazed to the sky and saw the sun was starting to seep through the horizon, with the moon fading into the morning twilight sky. I see it's my brother domain once more. Artemis said with a little amusement, more relaxed than she was hours ago. In short of some hours she already liked this male, not from the simple fact that he was basically the origin of the moon and source of her power, but he gave off an aura that could influence anyway and make them instantly like him almost. She was no exception. Sure, she had dreams of his life, but it was good to hear him give the details which made things interesting than just viewing them. In short, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze was gonna play a huge role in her life, and most likely many more to come. 15 years later. It's been 15 years since Naruto first stepped out of the comfort of his seal and be thrusted back into a brand new world. In all honesty, he didn't regret a thing. During that time he was able to learn about the new era he was in, and boy was it an exciting experience. Thanks to his photographic mind benefit of being a Jubi container and help with shadow clones, he was able to learn history all the way from the inevitable downfall of the shinobi age to advancement of technology, the many wars it had just like his. Of course he brushed up on the different pantheons such as Greek, Roman and Egyptian, suggestions of Artemis of course. Speaking of Artemis, their relationship couldn't be better than ever, as they have been great friends after the first 6 months of their first meeting. After the two knew almost every single thing about each other, bringing their friendship and secretive crush to new heights. Artemis decided it was a good time as any to finally introduce him to her hunters. It was an interesting experience for Naruto, say the least. FLASHBACK. Now Naruto, I'm gonna introduce you to my hunters, but be warned, you are the first male they've met in ages, so they might be skeptical and downright hostile toward you, so don't be surprised. Artemis said, giving Naruto one of her rare serious looks, making him nod in understanding. It wasn't the first time he had met a group of female warriors that were biased against males. Said group of females were from the Natashiko village, who were mainly consisted of women with very little to no males, since per tradition over there is that if a male defeats the women in battle, the male can live and could marry, but if defeated then death. When doing chats with Artemis on that subject, she was pretty interested in hearing it and compared them to the Amazons of old. Well, they were still alive today, hiding in plain sight, but that's for another time. Stepping in the camping grounds first, he couldn't even take his second step before arrows, knives and a few spears were lodged at him at great speed, some inching dangerously close to something he considered very precious. Some almost hit him, but with a simply wave of the hand he stopped the rest in midair. He saw a group of about 20 women from varying ages, from mid-teens and below, and sizes jump in front of him with bows aimed at different parts of his body. From what he also noticed about each of them, they were wearing silver gray camo pants with army boots, while wearing gray coats with fur linings. Leading the group was a fairly decent-sized woman of the physical age of 16 to 17, who had copper-colored skin framed by black hair, with most of it tied into a braid. She had dark brown eyes, a slightly upturned nose and small supple lips that were formed in a scowl. Of what stood her out a bit more from the rest was the silver band around her forehead. All the while Naruto kept his composure and calm facade, not even fazed by this assault on him, has been in more dire situations. While he was calm, he couldn't help stare at the dark-skinned beauty. You certainly didn't see that kind of exotic skin tone on a daily basis. I'll leave this area now or face dire consequences. The leader of the group said with utmost seriousness. It is alright, Zo, he means no harm since I was the one who brought him here. Artemis stated as she came into view. Lady Artemis, the now identified Zo said, bowing to the goddess very quickly, followed shortly by the other hunters. Yes, it's me, and I kindly ask you all to put down your weapons. As I stated before, this man means no harm whatsoever. Artemis said with a kind but stern voice, showing she meant business. Seeing as they don't want to upset their lady any farther, they complied, but kept their posture to be at the ready at a moment's notice. Naruto couldn't help but admire that. Nodding, she motioned Zo to follow her alongside Naruto to her tent, which was the biggest one in the forest. Walking inside, Artemis started to speak. Now Zo, I'd like you to meet Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. He is a dear friend of mine I could trust with my life. Naruto, this is Zo Nightshade, she is my lieutenant and right-hand woman. Artemis said, gesturing to each other. Zo was shocked that Artemis said she trusted a man no less with her life. Naruto smiled and held out his hand to the dark-skinned beauty. Nice to meet you, Zo, Naruto said while rubbing the back of his head with his other hand. Zo reluctantly had to admit the guy wasn't bad looking, if not odd, by the horns and clothing he wore. He had long white hair that reached all the way to just below his shoulder blades, giving him a slightly feral appearance with the long hair, purple rippled eyes with strange markings in them that gave him an exotic look, a face devoid of all baby fat and baby soft smooth skin. He wore a white kimono with black markings of the same strange symbols in his eyes, under a fit and muscular body, while having another necklace of the same symbols, but also another necklace which was a green crystal. Overall, he was one of the best-looking people known to Titans, mortals and god standards, but she had a duty to uphold and won't let impure thoughts taint her. Putting his descriptions aside, Zo was scowling at the offered hand. She glanced over to her lady and saw the look in her eye that she knows well enough for her comply with the handshake or else. Sighing a little, she took his hand and shook it. Pulling back a little too quickly, Zo quickly turned to Artemis. Lady Artemis, what is a male doing here? I thought they were forbidden from ever coming near our camp. Zo said, obviously agitated at being near a male for such a long period of time. Sighing, Artemis knew that her second-in-command was gonna react like this, making her rub her forehead to ease her own annoyance. She felt a hand rest on her shoulder, making her look to it to see Naruto smiling at her reassuringly, making her break out in a smile of her before turning to Zo. Artemis started to explain to Zo who exactly Naruto Uzumaki was. As the explanation went on, the dark-skinned beauty became noticeably less angry, but still kept her guard up. After a good 10 minutes of speaking, Artemis was finally finished taking a breath of air at her winded explanation. Zo just stood there stiff for a couple of minutes, contemplating her next action. Sighing, she looked at her lady with a neutral expression on her face. I'll trust your word, my lady, as you've never steered us wrong before. Turning to Naruto, she gave her meanest glare ever. If Naruto wasn't a primordial god, he'd shiver in absolute fear. As for you. I don't trust you at all and don't think because you're in Artemis' good grace we become buddies buddy, I'm watching you, one false move, or I think you deserve it, I'll cut you down, primordial god or no primordial god. Zoe said, poking Naruto in the chest with each word before leaving out of the tent in a huff. That was certainly interesting. Naruto stated with a chuckle, rubbing the back of his head. Shall warm up to you soon, Naruto, trust me. Artemis said with a rare giggle which sounded like music to his ears. Naruto just had this aura where you cold hate the guy unless you were a stuck-up asshole or truly evil. I'm sure she will, Archan. Naruto said while giving her a thumbs up with a massive grin, making the moon goddess giggle harder. Flashback END. For about 2 years Zoe still hadn't warmed up to him while most of the other hunters did. Funny fact, Naruto wanted the hunters to feel as comfortable as possible, so he often used his sexy jutsu which turned him into the female version of him, but instead of his old female self, it looked exactly like his male form just in a female's body. He used it frequently for about a year or two, before everyone finally got comfortable with Naruto and started to accept him, except Zoe. He had to admit she was a stubborn one to crack, he always liked those kinds of people. It would make things more satisfying once he is able to get through their impenetrable walls. It will take time, so for now just baby steps and something might happen, who knows. Another thing went on that during one visit to Artemis camp, he ended up running into the sun god Apollo. Thank fate that he had the habit of being in his female form when he did, or else things would have been complicated. From what Artemis told Naruto, Apollo had the habit of stopping by every so often and would sometimes flirt and hit on the hunters, which never stops. Honestly, it took all his restraint not to shove a Juubi-powered Rasen Shuriken in his face when Apollo tried to flirt with him. Apollo looks similar to a guy from Miami or Malibu, of having a swimmer's build with slightly spiky blonde hair, tanned skin, while also having pearly white teeth with eyes that were yellow as the sun he drives across the sky every day. He also wore khaki shorts and a white button-up shirt while having sandals on to somewhat complete his Miami Malibu attire. On the moment Naruto was being hit on by Apollo, an idea popped into his head and quickly formulated a very satisfying prank that will make him think twice of flirting with him ever again. Naruto eventually decided to let Apollo think he is finally giving way on the flirting process, so Naruto had went to flirt back. Through some other actions that went on in the meeting eventually lead up to having Apollo become very traumatized of seeing hinged copies of Speedo-wearing Might Guy and Rock Lee hugging each other, proclaiming their love of youth with an illusionary background of a sunset beach. Apollo ended up screaming his lungs out with blood coming out of his eyes while running out of camp, ripping his hair out, which immediately grew back out, making the process infinite. Both Artemis and her hunters were in a mixture of complete laughter and horrified expressions of what they just seen, but it was very well worth it. Apollo hadn't stopped by in the camp for several years, and whenever he laid eyes on the hunters, he had the urgency of running away of the feeling of the repressed memory he had to hopefully be rid of. He couldn't even make his beautiful sunsets properly anymore without turning into fetal position and crying. And this result had earned Naruto some good notches from the varying hunters, even Zoe, since she was hit on the most by the sun god. It wasn't until Naruto's 4th year with the hunters until Zoe started to trust him. The reason was because while Artemis was at her Summer Olympian Council meeting and the other hunters were resting and recuperating, Naruto and Zoe were tasked to go out to bag some kills for food for both the hunters in Camp Half-Blood. Everything was normal between the two as a tense hunter and a laid-back primordial could get. Naruto went off for a quick moment to go find the kill that he injured. While gone, Zoe was in the clearing by herself until she was ambushed by monsters of varying numbers somewhere between the dozens. Apparently they thought she was Artemis because of the highly similar scent they gave off. Of course Zoe didn't go without a fight, taking many with her before they started to enclose on her with one of the monsters sending a sharp weapon towards her. Zoe was ready to face death with a smile. At the last moment Zoe didn't feel any blow hit her at all, only something wet. When focusing again, she saw Naruto having his back towards the monsters with a weapon pierced through his body, his lung to be exact. The exact same spot where Sasuke stabbed him at the valley at the end all those millennia ago. When she saw what he did in a rare act of weakness, she teared up to see someone she scorned and ridiculed so much in the past 4 years save her from certain death with a smile on his face. Naruto soon broke the spear from the exit wound and stepped forward, having the rest of the shaft out of his body, with both ends of the wound burning, with steam coming out as the wound closed just as fast as the wound opened. In a quick motion, Naruto used the spear end he had and jabbed it into the monster's head, killing it instantly, leaving golden dust behind. He didn't stop there as Naruto made quick work in killing each and every one of them with a combination of speed, strength, jutsu and powers granted from his eyes. Once the area was clear with just the two of them, he finally turned around and gave a big smile before he lose all the air out of his lungs as he was punched in the stomach before being brought into a warm hug. Naruto soon felt something wet on his shirt and realized it was a mixture of the blood that hit her face with her tears. He rubbed her back and kept on telling her that things were alright and sorry he didn't get to her sooner. Something seemed to block everything in the general area, but took little effort for him to get through the barrier, but none of that mattered now as he was there for her. After that, Naruto's and Zoe's relationship improved through leaps and bounds. They considered themselves just as close as Artemis and Naruto, as they spent almost every chance to be in each other's presence. So whenever Naruto had visited the camp and helped out on some hunts, Zoe's mood would brighten more than usual, which surprised Artemis and her other hunters a lot, but over time they got used to it. Now, during a lot of the times over the years, Naruto had traveled around a lot to see how the modern world was like, but of course he did it the old-fashioned way, from a mixture of walking and quick teleportations, instead of using all those useless contraptions. The only one he'd ever consider using would be the trains, since he also had those in his old era. He didn't want to have the gods to notice his energy, even though he was a god, a primordial one at that, he can still emit his godlike energy. He'd rather not have to deal with childish bickering at the moment, thank you very much. During his travels he did run into some influence of the other pantheons that Artemis had mentioned to him before, like the Norse pantheon, residing mostly in the higher northern hemisphere like Russia, Canada, Alaska, and Greenland. But the Egyptian pantheon, they were actually closed off, with them only residing in the Egyptian areas back when they were in their prime and not stepping out of their boundaries. The Asia and Shinto pantheon obviously resided in the Asian territories, and he did have some nice chats with them, since they were still active during his mortal years and prior, but when Naruto became a god, they ended up in a deep hibernation, for who knows how long due to the shockwave he gave out. He was glad people still worship deities like Kami, Yami, Izuna, Inari and the such. It give him much more to connect on in the world on a spiritual level. There were other small pantheons he had run into, but the last one that he almost made contact with was one that was the parallel one with the first one he met, the Roman pantheon. During one of their get-togethers, Artemis eventually told Naruto about the Roman pantheon and how they came to be all because of the Trojan War. With the Trojans having to leave their home to find a new one, they didn't want to be associated with the Greeks anymore, so things eventually lead to them to find Rome. Their culture became more disciplined, militaristic, and warlike, which the Greek gods eventually adapting because of how damaging things were in the Trojan War, made the Greek pantheon develop a split personality. Artemis warned Naruto to stay away from Camp Jupiter, since they might end up reporting to the Roman gods, and in turn would warn their Greek personas. Naruto agreed, but in return he wanted to meet a Roman counterpart so that he can formally introduce herself and ask her if she can keep him a secret from the rest of the Roman pantheon. With some hesitation, Artemis complied and shifted into Diana. It was quite noticeable on the change, with her hair seeming to brighten up a bit and had a red tint to it, along with her clothing going into a different casual attire to show she was more disciplined, militaristic and warlike. The chat was interesting to say the least, but things went well in the end, with Diana complying since she shares the same body as her sister and appreciates of what he has done for them and the hunters in the time he was in their lives. Before shifting back to her Greek persona, Diana hugged Naruto and smelled him for some reason, and once letting go he saw Artemis lightly blush and leaving Naruto to do whatever he did. After traveling the world for several years, discovering new things such as cultures, religions, food etc., he was finally back in America and New York at an outside cafe drinking some herbal tea. He saw that the weather was getting worse, with thunderclouds looking ready to blow. He wondered what was going on, especially since a lot of the thunderclouds were residing close to the Empire State Building, which was one of the entrances to Olympus. He'll probably be asking Artemis what is going on when he runs into her next time. During his musings, Naruto pulled out some candy he had gotten from this one shop earlier that day called Sweets on America, and honestly the place had a good selection. He had met this one woman there, Sally Jackson if he remembered correctly, and became good friends with her, especially after he left one hell of a tip for her for excellent customer service. She practically beamed at him after the shocked expression she saw from the tip he gave her, but he told her that he had a feeling that she needed it badly and he was a very generous person before leaving the store. Plus it was priceless to see her eyes bug out as he handed her $1,000 bills. Money wasn't an issue at all, since with creation of all things it was no hassle. He was able to make as much as he wanted after looking through the varying currencies across the globe to get the structure and compositions of each of them to be sure they were accurate. Up for some more Greek history, Naruto decided to head to the nearby museum with Greek history instead of going to a library, as usual. Yeah, it does seem to get stale after going into so many libraries and learning so damn much to last several lifetimes. Standing up he left, but not before leaving a hefty tip to the waitress. Doing a quick Hiroshin undetected, Naruto was able to land outside of the museum just in time to see a small group of kids around 13 to 15 walking into the museum with a wheelchair-bound teacher and an ugly-looking female. Of course he knew one was a Fury and the other was a Centaur, but it wasn't any of his concern and let them be. He'd rather stay out of anything god-related. Especially since Artemis asked him to try and not get in contact with them, but something could happen at some point or whatever. He went inside and started wandering around looking at the various exhibits, getting him to be all nostalgic of his travels around the globe, interacting with the varying pantheons that were on display, and mentally corrected some of the details that were wrong. Each exhibit had a different god, legendary monster or titan. Currently Naruto was now in Kronos, part of the Greek exhibit, about to head over towards Hades afterwards. He was going to pass by it since it was not a great story honestly, but something caught his scent that was like being inside of an ocean. He turned to the source and saw a young teenage boy with dark hair that gave him that emo-ish vibe with deep seaweed green eyes. Remembering from the past discussions with Artemis of listing the traits of the demigod children, Naruto distinctly remembered that those kind of physical features along with the oceanic scent would mostly lean towards a spawn of Poseidon. He noticed that there was a mist Artemis liked to call it. She explained that it was supposed to block out mortals from seeing what they weren't supposed to. Sighing, he decided to be generous that day and not let an innocent kid die while he had something to say about it. For now he'll have to wait for the opportunity to strike. And the three gods have been at odds ever since. The wheelchair-disguised centaur said, getting Naruto out of his thoughts. Always arguing, always threatening war. Several occasions, they would come down to earth and well, how should I put this? Hook up. A handicapped kid said, getting a laugh out of the other students. Naruto got a good look at him and felt that the kid was being a bit close to the Poseidon child, like he was trying to guard him or something. From what Naruto could get from that kid's scent, he smelled like goats. It seems that the kid is a satyr. Yes, as Mr. Underwood humbly stated, hook up with mortals. Children of these unions, half god half human. Now would anyone like to tell me what they are called? The centaur said, looking at the students before putting a distinct look at the Poseidon child. Percy. The now named Percy was knocked out of his musical trance as he pulled out of his earbuds when Mr. Underwood tapped him a little. Ah yes, Mr. Burner. What is the proper name of an offspring of a god and a human? Mr. Burner asked sternly. Demigod. Percy stated. Exactly. Now many of these demigods became great villains like Heracles or Hercules, as he is commonly known these days, and Achilles. So Percy, mind telling me another? The teacher asked, getting Poseidon's child to shake his head. It'll give you a hint, both you and the hero share something in common. Naruto already guessed of what the centaur, Mr. Burner, was trying to do of getting Percy to realize his given name was the same as the demigod of old, especially since they were right in front of a stone carving of Perseus defeating the Cetus. Perseus? Correct. Now over here we have the display of Kronos. Mr. Jackson, what is one unique occupation you can think of along with his story? Well, he was the king of the gods. Gods? The teacher said, getting Naruto to already guess that the kid wasn't all that knowledgeable on the stuff all that well. Sorry, I meant Titan. And he didn't like his kids, who ended up as gods, I think. So, Kronos ate them, right? Percy said in a staggered pace, getting Mr. Burner to nod. But his wife hid baby Zeus and gave Kronos a rock to eat instead. Later, when Zeus was older, he tricked his dad into barfing up his brothers and sisters. Some of the pretty girls in class said at once. Why would the guy do such a thing? One of the boys asked. Paranoia. Naruto said to himself, but it was somewhat loud enough for several people to hear him, from like Percy, the handicapped kid, to the centaur teacher. And so there was this big fight between the gods and titans. In the end the gods won. The oceanic child finished practically summarizing the godly battle in a few sentences. Naruto couldn't help but inwardly chuckle at that. Like we're going to use this in real life. As if it's going to say on our job applications, please explain why Kronos ate his kids. A ginger-haired girl among the group of students whispered to a friend of hers. And why, Mr. Jackson, to paraphrase Miss Bobafett's excellent question, does this matter in real life? The teacher asked, since the girl's whispering wasn't all that quiet. Sorry sir, I don't know. Percy said, getting Naruto to realize that the kid didn't know of his heritage even more so. I see then. The teacher looked disappointed in the reply. Well then, half credit to you. Zeus had tricked his father into digesting a mixture of mustard and wine, which made us disgorge his other 5 children, who of course being immortal gods, had been living and growing up completely undigested in the Titan's stomach. The gods defeated their father, sliced him to pieces with his own scythe, and scattered his remains in Tartarus, the darkest part of the underworld. On another, happier note, I believe it's time for lunch. Mrs. Dodds, would you lead us back outside? As the students dispersed and were eventually heading towards the eating area outside, Naruto caught sight of the Fury disguised as Mrs. Dodds talked to Percy for a moment and leading him to another room. The Primordial already guessed of what might happen, so he decided to follow once he put an illusion on himself so no one can see. Following them in, he saw that the demigod was unaware and highly confused on why he was pulled away from the other group by the mean-looking teacher. The woman for her part was mumbling about crazy nonsense that had the dark-haired boy confused before it morphed into horror once he saw the disguised Fury turn into its true form, easily towering over the smaller boy. He saw the bloodlusted fury start attacking the boy relentlessly, making said boy barely dodge each encounter. Unfortunately, his luck ran short when the fury caught the scruff of his shirt and lifting him up to the ground. "Where is the lightning bolt you stole, child? Tell me or I'll rip your face off." The monster screeched in his face, scaring him shitless. I don't know what you're talking about." The demigod genuinely confused, the fury didn't care as she looked like she was about to bite his head off. Before she could do that, a small knife projectile with flames encasing it soared towards her, piercing her dead in her heart, with the fire consuming her body, making her screech in agony. Naruto added seals to this kunai so it could seal her soul for eternity. He knew that monsters of the underworld would keep coming back, regardless if you killed them with fire, swords, guns, etc. He learned to permanently put them down, was to seal them with his mastery over Fuinjutsu. After a moment she was gone, as if she wasn't there, even her dust remains were sealed away. Afterwards Naruto decided to leave the museum, his job done and already done enough, more than necessary even. He didn't notice the wheelchair-bound teacher and the dark-skinned teenager who was using his crutches, it wasn't his concern anymore. Back in the museum, the boy Percy was on the ground looking completely shell-shocked, while his best friend Grover came up to see if he was alright, while the teacher Chiron wheeled up to the kunai left behind before picking it up and inspecting it. It was still slightly warm from the fire wrapping around it. It was an interesting weapon, a kunai to be exact, a combat knife used in battles mostly during the shinobi era, but it was used a couple more hundreds of years after the fall of the era. "I must inform the council of this," Chiron whispered to himself silently before turning around and wheeling away. Thanks for watching.